I think about my career as like two big blocks. There's like the first 12 to 15 years, which was doing one job in 3 organizations. Then there's like the next 12 or 15 years, which is one organization and more than 3 jobs. So for the first block, I did training, organizational development. The 3 companies were AT&T, Arthur Andersen, and JP Morgan Chase. 15 years or so into it, God completely called me out of the corporate world. I'll save that story for another time. And I went to work for Christ Community Church. And in the 15 years there, I have been the connections guy. I've overseen communications. I've done multi-site. There was even a stint where I did creative arts for a while. Then I did the operations and the whole senior director thing. So I've just kind of said, God, wherever you want to point me, just kind of point me in that direction. So that's enough about me. What are we going to be talking about for the next 40 minutes? Well, you can see from the title there, it says from doing to equipping, which I hope is one of those things you realize that as a leader, we should all make that switch at some point, right? We should go from doing things to equipping others to do things. So that part of it makes sense. Now, if you're looking at the next part, like what in the world is he talking about? Don't be a burl. Well, here is where hopefully this makes some sense. The reason I say don't be a burl is let me give you a quick tale of 2 stories, or 2 TV shows. This is going back to the beginnings of TV, right? And there were really 2 main shows on the air at that point. One was the Milton Berle Show, and the other one was the Ed Sullivan Show. And the tale of 2 shows goes like this. Both of those shows started out with kind of the same kind of mission and kind of format. They were variety shows. And the desire of the show was to find, cultivate local talent, the up and coming, and give them a platform that would launch them into their careers. And many of them were very successful because of the launching pad of each of these shows. Well, they started to go 2 different paths. So Milton Berle slowly became less and less about finding and cultivating talent and putting the spotlight on them and launching them in their careers. And he started to make himself the focus of the shows. And it basically became a skit show where Milton Berle was the star of most of the skits. Ed Sullivan stuck to the roots. And he continued throughout the lifespan of that show to continue to be the mission of finding up-and-coming talent, giving them a spotlight to launch them into a career. And if you think about it, right, most people to this day, if you put those 2 up there and they said, do you know, how many of you know Ed Sullivan? Most hands would, I haven't heard of Ed Sullivan. How many of you know Milton Berle? Who? What? Ed Sullivan is kind of his institution of television, right? His show ended up lasting, I think, 3 times longer than the Milton Berle Show. So really the question is, and hopefully you can see where it's going here, is who are you more like? If you think of yourself as a leader, if you think of yourself as your ministry as a show, who are you more like? Are you more putting yourself in the spotlight? Or are you looking for up-and-coming talent? You're in the wings. And you're saying, nope, the stage is all yours, right? I trust you with that stage. And I want to use this stage. I want you to use this stage to launch yourself into hopefully something bigger than I ever would be. Because that's what Ed Sullivan did. I mean, if you think about the people who came on the show, most of them went on to become bigger than what the reason Ed Sullivan is famous is because he made other people famous. Does that make sense? So what I want to do in the next 40 minutes or so is just walk through a quick process for how to do that. And if you're not inspired by the tale of 2 shows, well, maybe Scripture will inspire you to think about why tonight and this topic is important. So let me just read this, what it says in Ephesians 4:11 through 13. It says, so Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, the teachers, that's us, right? The priesthood of all believers. So when you see that read yourself in there. And why did he give us? Say it with me. To equip his people for works of service. That's our motivation, right? If you're not motivated by the Ed Sullivan stuff, hopefully you're motivated This is what God wants you to do. This is what Scripture commands us to do, is our job is to equip other people for the works of service. Why? So the body of Christ may be built up. Okay, this is for the edification. What I'm talking about here tonight is for the edification of everybody. It's for the edification of this body, not just the small C church, for the big C church. And if you're wondering to yourselves, well, I've kind of already done that, right? Here's the finish line. We can stop thinking about this topic. We can stop doing this when we've done this. Until we reach unity in faith and the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. I will never attain that. Right? So I look at this command and I say it's something that was as true today as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow. Our job as leaders is to equip others for the edification of the body. 3-step process for how to do that. We're going to first look at determining the opportunities. Like, what are the opportunities we have to bring people on stage? What is the stage we have to bring people onto? All right, the next one is create a profile. What does that look like? Who am I looking for? It's that kind of the cultivating, looking for that up-and-coming talent. And the last one is to identify and recruit. So let's just jump right in. The first one, determine opportunities. This really is the starting block. And if you think about it, if you don't understand the opportunities you have to do this, there's no motivation. Right? If you think you have it all, you can do it all of those things, if you don't understand your needs, your opportunities, then why would you ever pay attention to what I'm going to talk about? So the first step is understanding what are the needs, what are the areas. So here are some questions we should all be asking ourselves. And I'm going to pause after I go through these because I want you to have one of these in mind as we walk through the rest of it. Because if you don't understand your motivation, it'll be more difficult to listen and apply the other 2 steps. So here's some questions. Some of these, you may be like, that's really not my question. Others be like, yeah, that's my question. That's the one I need to pay attention to, right? So the first one is, where do I need help right now? Some of you are like, please, right? Like, I am up to here. I need help. So for some of you, it's like, yeah, that's an easy question. I need it here. I need it there. Easy to answer. Some of you are saying, where are my expected areas of growth? Right? Like, okay, I've heard around here, right? Like the kids ministry, there's big groups of kids coming up, right? As they go through. Well, I think of the need. Well, as those kids begin to progress, hopefully you're saying there's a need for the up and coming that's, you see what I'm saying, right? So are you thinking, where are my areas of expected growth? The next question is a little different, right? So it's not saying, where are my expected areas of growth? This one is saying, where could I grow if I had more? We all have those, I think, my project list at home, right? Like, if I had more time, I would do that. If I had more skill, well, I would tackle that, right? And they just always kind of sit there. Well, what if you did? What if somebody came up to you and said, hey, I could give you 3 hours a week? I'm interested in doing that. Like, if you knew you had it, where could you grow your ministry? Sometimes I think our ministries are just like this big, right? They're just as big as we can keep a hold of. And if you think about inviting other people, it's going to grow. We'll come back to that. Who can be challenged or elevated to take on more responsibility, right? You know the people, right? I call these kind of like high capacity volunteers, right? You know those people who, boy, if they were just challenged in the right way, if they were just pushed in their faith, right, we would see them go to a whole different level. So some of you may be saying, yep, I know that person. They've been a faithful servant. I see something in there. They have the great character. They have the skills, whatever. Do they need to be called to something greater, more challenging? And that may push them in that faith zone. They may look and say, oh, no, I can't. I'm not ready for that, right? Part of this process is getting them in that space. And the last one, I'm going to get a little personal here, right? And saying, what are you doing right now that you should be giving away? right? I think it was D.L. Moody who said, it's better to get 10 men to do the work than to do the work of 10 men. Some of us need to be thinking through, what do I need to give away? We're gonna park on this one a little bit, because I think this is one of those, I think is, for a lot of us, at least myself, I struggle with this one, even thinking about that, what can I give away, right? So let's first talk about reasons. Like, does this make sense, right? Is this biblical to talk about? So we're gonna look at some biblical examples. The first one, right? Exodus, Judges, Jethro saw what was happening and said, this isn't good, right? You need to get some more people to help you with this. Why? Why did he say it was no good? Because it was burning him out. Some of you, I say that right now and you're like, yep, I am burned out. Maybe it's because you're holding on to too much. Maybe you need to figure out, what do I need to release to someone else? Second one, Solomon appointed many officials to help manage his kingdom. Look at the last line there. And what happened? He managed through others and his kingdom was enlarged. Again, that goes right back to this picture, right? I think some of us, our kingdoms are just this big because they're just as big as what we can hold on to. And if we empower and delegate others to do things, our kingdoms will be enlarged. Luke, right? Christ sent out 72 others to preach and heal the sick. What I want you to hear there is, look at what he had people do. He sent people out not to do the small jobs that nobody else wanted, right? I mean, you talk about empowerment. He didn't empower them to take on the small things. He empowered them to go out and preach and teach and spread the gospel and heal the sick. He delegated significant responsibility, significant things. And the last one, the 12 apostles delegated some of their administrative functions so they could focus their attention on prayer and teaching. Right? There's a stewardship concept here as well. This one was really driven home to me several years ago. It's embarrassing to say this, but I was actually teaching a spiritual gifts class. Okay, so set the environment, right? So I'm chronically early. I get to things early. And I had gotten there, I'd set up all my stuff, and I was looking around. I'm like, what else needs to be done, right? And I saw this big pile of food that was in the kitchen. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna set all that stuff up, right? I'm a servant at heart. I'm gonna get after this, right? So I put all this stuff out, and the campus pastor at the time came in, and he's like, what happened? And I was all like, yeah, I took care of it. And I'll never forget this. Like, he looked at me and he said, do you have the gift of hospitality? I'm like, oh, not at all. Like, I have none of that. And he's like, okay. And he said, I have a volunteer coming in about 5 minutes who does have that gift. How do you think they're going to feel when they come in and see this has already been done? Wow, that was okay. That hit home, right? And he's like, it was that balance of, man, I did something, think I was doing something well, but also glaringly holding up a mirror to me saying, that's just bad stewardship, right? Like, this person has a gift that you didn't allow to be exercised, right? Why? For the edification of the body, for the building up of other people. Like, you kind of robbed her of the ability to do that because you just wanted to get it done. It's always, I know it's kind of maybe too harsh of an example, right? But it's one of those things that's always stuck with me, that example of them dividing things up, it wasn't just saying, oh, I'm going to get off to do more important things while you do these things. No, it was to say, each of us have unique gifts, and they are to be stewarded correctly. And part of that is, right, understanding who the people are on your team who have the gifts. Are they being exercised in the right way? Are you, again, maybe this is in that same topic of, are you holding on to things that you shouldn't be holding on to? Are you working outside of your giftedness? Are you holding on to things? And you can do them, right? But is there somebody else that if you said, no, hey, you know what? What's my real giftedness? Like, let me get in that zone and see the fruit come out of that and invite somebody else to have that. I'll get off my soapbox. You can tell that's a passion for me because I got my hand slapped a few years ago. But so think about it. There's clearly scriptural reasons to delegate and empower others. We're going to have a little bit more fun with this. The reasons are, well then, what are some excuses for not delegating? Some of these might hit a little close to home. Let's walk through some of these. The first one, I can complete the task better myself. Anybody ever said that? I have. Okay, well, let me just take you back to the scripture we just read. Could Jesus teach, preach, and heal the sick better than the 72? Yeah, that's a big yes, right? That's a big yes. So it's totally an excuse. And I think that's one that tricks us, right? Like we say, well, that seems really valid, right? There's nobody that can do that better than me. Well, it didn't stop Jesus, right? Did they still accomplish great things for the kingdom? Absolutely. Did they still have a knowledge that Jesus could have still done this better than them? Absolutely. But it's an excuse. It's clearly an excuse. The next one. There's no one who has the skills to do it. Again, some of you nodding your head. I know I've said this one, right? And honestly, there's probably some truth to this. This is the equipping part. I'm telling you, if as leaders, you're always on the search for somebody who has 100% of the skills to do it, your pool is going to be really small. You may find them, and that's great. But remember, this isn't the finding process I'm talking about here, right? This is the equipping process. This isn't going from doing to finding. This is going from doing to equipping. So yeah, absolutely. Part of that might be to say, yeah, they don't have the skills to do it. Okay, then how do you skill them up? What does that look like? Do you have a process to do that? Do you have training in place? Do you have other people who can come alongside them to help with that? Again, it's just another excuse. I don't have enough time to delegate. I'm glad some of you are chuckling, right? Because you know what I'm going to say. You don't have enough time to not delegate, right? And don't get me wrong. It is not easy, right? The process we're talking about of transferring authority and responsibility and task to another person, that takes time. But I hope you don't see that as a cost. It's a what? It's not a cost. It's a hear someone say it. It's an investment, like for sure, right? It's short-term pain for long-term gain. All the things we hear. But yeah, if you're clearly always looking for people who have the skill, you might not be as successful at this process. But if you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to find the people who have the skill and I'm going to take the time to skill them up, it will pay off in the long run for sure. Ooh, this one. Oh man, this is a tough one, right? I enjoy completing the task myself. Most people think about this process of delegating or passing things on is right. We look at our to-do list and we think of all the things that we don't want to do and we give that to somebody else. I mean, just think about that in principle. That sounds horrible, doesn't it? Right? Like, what if we did that in our families? Right? Well, maybe on Sunday chore day, maybe I've done that once or twice, given all the chores I don't want to my teenager. But I hope by the time we're done with this, you come back to this and you say, that actually might be one of the most joy-filled places to delegate. Because think about it. You're passionate about it, right? When you hand something off to somebody that you like doing and you watch them get good at doing that too, isn't that fun? Like when we've had that experience in our lives where someone comes alongside us and we enjoy to do the same thing together and we experience it, that's a great thing. So hopefully you look at this and say, okay, what are those things on my list that I really like doing? Maybe I should hand that off. Trust me, I think God will reward that. I think he won't just stick you with all the nonsense, non-fun stuff you don't like. I think he will continue to fill you up with things you enjoy. And I think you might even find you enjoy that process of passing on things you enjoy doing. I don't want to lose control. Great. You shouldn't. If you see delegation and empowerment as a handing off of responsibility and empowerment, I think you've missed it, right? I think a lot of people see this process, see if this word picture makes sense, right? That whatever the relay race, right, where you hand the baton to the next runner and they take off, right? They see delegation as that picture, right? I'm handing that off to you, and I stop running, like, whoo, glad you took it, right? I am done. I think you should see delegation and empowerment as a three-legged race, right? You are hitching yourself to this person, and at least for a time, we're gonna say, we're gonna run this together, right? Because I gotta transfer this. And then at some point, yeah, you probably do unhitch, but I don't think if you're doing this right, you ever totally, as a leader, do you ever lose some of that responsibility and control and authority? I hope not, right? Maybe it shifts, but you should still always be having check-ins to see if what's going is going right and it being done well, but it should be done together, not as a releasing it. Again, just another, in my mind, another excuse. I'm threatened that someone will do a better job. Honestly, I don't know how to handle this one because it's true. I think it's human nature, right? I think that's tough, especially when you're known for being good at something. To delegate and empower and see that person get better at it and get affirmed and get recognized for doing that and doing it better than you. Right? Moment of truth. That's tough, isn't it? That's tough. If you see what we're talking about from a small picture, right? Why are we doing this? For the edification of the body, right? For all of us. So your loss is everyone else's gain. We should be celebrating the fact when someone equips someone to go out and do something for the local church and they end up doing it better for the body than you did. They ended up equipping people better. They bear more fruit. Like, wow, we should celebrate that. I know it's tough. It's tough to swallow personally. But I hope you look at that and say, there's a bigger economy that we're paying attention to. And man, that should be a goal. Wouldn't it be a great goal instead of switch it? That's a goal, is for me to every person who I'm discipling and training up and empowering, that my goal is that they would do it better than I would. Think about what would happen in the kingdom if we all had that mindset. That would be fantastic to view it that way. But I get it. It's still human nature. It's still tough to not be the expert, to not be known as the person who's good at this, to not be the go-to person. It takes a shift. That's the first step. Second step is now that you understand the opportunities, and this really does build. Once you understand the opportunities, now you just say, okay, let's create a profile. Like this is the opportunity, this is the need, this is the hole, this is what needs to be filled, this is the opportunity. What's the profile of the person who fits that? So I know you look at this and you say, really, like job descriptions, right? Like, oh, really? Like we all roll our eyes and think, do I really have to do a ministry job description to do this process? Let me just give you an example, right? I'm ultimately going to get to yes, right? But I'll give you some different ways of doing it. Imagine you were trying to get a job someplace. And you went to the person, or they came to you and said, hey, I'd really like you to come work here. And you said, yeah, okay. What am I going to be doing? You know, we probably have that written down someplace, but you know, do you really need to see that? Like, just just come on out on Monday and check it out for a couple hours, and you'll pick it up. You'd be like, you're crazy, right? It would never happen in the corporate world. I mean, can you imagine that being the hiring strategy of an organization? We're not gonna have any job description out there. We're just gonna tell people it's gonna be great. Come on by, check it out, and we'll see if it fits for you. It just wouldn't work. But somehow we think it's going to work in the church, right? We can just, by our power of persuasion, although they know what it is. I don't need to tell, they know what it means to do whatever X job. I'm telling you, they don't, right? It's kind of the basic motivation. Most people aren't going to jump into something they don't know what it is, or they might not be good at it. So this is a tool that I think is maybe tedious, but the power of it for the next step, for that recruiting, is huge. So if you don't want to think about a ministry job description, think about it this way. Get beyond the skills, right? You should list the skills. But what are the attitudes, the knowledge, the gifts, the character, the personality that are needed? Sometimes I have people think about it this way. If you were going to do whatever opening opportunity you have, let's say you need someone to do a small group student person. Instead of thinking ministry job description, which sounds so boring and corporate, I say if you were going to create a recipe for that position, what would the ingredients be? And don't just think skills, think character. What type of personality, what character, what attitude, what skills, what values do they need? And in what amounts, right? Do they need a pinch of hospitality, or do they need a whole boatload of hospitality, right? And think about it. And sometimes if you just think, if I had to create a recipe for a person, jot down, here are the ingredients, right? Here's how much of each of those. And then what you've really done, you've really written a job description. You just need to kind of tweak the language. But if you think about, most of us go to skills. I always say, man, give me someone with the right attitude, character. I'll teach them the skills. It's tough to teach beliefs and values and character. I mean, think about some of the people who were called in Scripture, and why were they called? You look at a Joshua. You look at a Noah. You look at a Peter. Even some fun ones like Zacchaeus, right? Why were they called? Some of them skill-based, but most of them, if you go back and read their stories about why they were called, God saw something in them that was much greater than the skill set they had. God saw an attitude, a character. Those are the things, hopefully when you're walking around or when you're creating this, don't just think skills. Think what are the attitudes, knowledge, belief, all those things. Last step, but I want to park here for a second. You give me a gut check. Here's how I think most people enter into this process. They have a vague idea of what the need or opportunity is, right? They may not have spent a lot of time thinking those questions, but if you ask somebody, where do you need help right now? Most people could probably give you a little bit. So they spend very little thought on the opportunity, and they jump straight to identifying and recruiting. Maybe not even identify, they jump straight to recruiting. Do you see how important that middle bucket is? How can you possibly recruit somebody if you haven't thought through the description of what you're calling them to? In the places I've taught this before, the places who have actually taken this and actually created some type of job description. I've had people come back to me and say, it is by far the most powerful recruiting tool I have ever used. Because again, simple motivation. People aren't going to join something if they don't really understand what they're going to be doing. So most of us, I think, jump straight, do a little bit here, and then jump straight to recruiting. Hopefully you see, we just covered it. We didn't spend a ton of time on it, but hopefully you see you really can't get to step 3 without spending quite a bit of time in step 2. Does that make sense? So let's go to step 3, last step of the night. First one is Captain Obvious, right? If you look at Scripture, right, before Jesus called many of his people, he spent time in prayer. Really, that should be Captain Obvious. This should have been the first slide I put up there. All of this should be bathed in prayer. Again, I think God cares about his local church and equipping people and edifying people to do the works a lot more than we do, right? That's hard to say because we love the local church, but God has put he has a lot riding on the local church, right, to fulfill his mission. And so I think he cares about this. I think if you would in earnest pray through this process, he'll make it clear. He'll show you. You might not like what he shows you. That's the trick, right? I don't doubt that he'll show you. It's the obedience side that's the tricky side of that, right? A couple other things. Recruit like Jesus. So if you think about some of the ways Jesus recruited, it's kind of counterintuitive. So let me go through this, and then we'll end with some questions we should be answering for people as we recruit them. But if you think about how Jesus recruited, Jesus communicated his vision well, right? I mean, we know the Great Command, the Great Commission, right? Here's the bonus. That's still our mission, right? We don't have to come up with a new mission. Right? When we call people into ministry, it's the same mission that Jesus said. I said the other day, like, who wouldn't want to be a part of the local church? It is the best organization with the best mission statement of any organization in the history of the world. Like, it should be easy. Especially, it should be, I'm not asking to call your neighbor who you just say hi over taking in garbage to be a part of I mean, we're talking about the people you're rubbing shoulders with who are believers, right, who understand the mission. Your mission and calling people and explaining the mission of what you're calling them should be easy. The next thing, Jesus said clear expectations. People knew, right? Like, this is, if you do this, here's what I expect of you. We should be doing the same thing. This is one I think we miss sometimes, right? Jesus pointed out the ups and downs. You go back and look at some of the things he told. Hey, if you do this, here's what's going to happen to you. That list is often not super pleasant, right? Jesus did not sugarcoat the commitment that it's going to take to be in ministry. And I'm not telling you go out and tell people, you're going to be martyred and people, don't do that, right? Unless you think that's your ministry and that's going to happen, then tell them, right? But he let people know, like, here's my mission, here are the expectations, and here's what you can expect, the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. And Jesus called people to action, right? I think sometimes, we do this thing where we're calling people into ministry, and it's kind of like, well, just pray about that for a little bit, and if you want to talk to me more about it, well, come find me, and no, Jesus was like, come follow me, like, do it now, drop everything, come. This is what we're all about. Like, I think we need to have that same enthusiasm to calling people into ministry, and if we believe in it, why wouldn't people want to drop it and follow us into ministry? So with that backdrop, as you start to engage with people, so again, you've identified the opportunities, you now have in mind, hey, here's what I'm looking for. As you start to identify and recruit people, here's some questions that you should answer. But before you do this, if you take nothing else out of what I talk about here tonight, I think this will change the perspective. Most people think of recruiting and identifying is about their ministry. I have a hole, I need to find someone to fill my slot. You're missing something way bigger than that, right? When you're interacting with people, all of us should be thinking, what are you doing? Where are you plugged in? Where could you get plugged in? What's your giftedness? Oh, you might like to do this. I know they have an opening there. If we're just recruiting for our own ministries, we'll be fine. But if we're all out there getting to know the people and saying, you would be great at this. I need to connect you with this person. We're recruiting for Jesus' mission to fulfill in the local church. We're all recruiting for something larger. Does that make sense? You with me on that one? Right? That's a game changer if we start to see the perspective of not just my world, my needs, and we start to see it as the churches need? And you're even having those conversations. Do you know what another ministry in the church needs right now? Do you know their opportunities? Do you know their whole? If you don't know that, how can you be recruiting and identifying for that? So here's the last thing. If we want to recruit like Jesus, these are some questions we should be answering for people, whether it's written down as part of a job description, or you should at least expect people to ask you these things and have answers. The first one is, what will they be doing? That's a job description thing, right? There's some really core motivational principles in here. Most people aren't going to sign up for something. They don't know what it is. So what are they going to be doing? How does their role fit into something larger? That's the mission piece, right? People want to know that what they do matters. I think Matt said that, right? People want to know what people do. Help them understand, you're not just serving coffee. You're creating a hospitable environment for a first-time guest to come in here, and because of that, hopefully they will encounter Jesus. Like, do they understand the significance? There's no small serving role in the local church. Have you made it clear? Do they understand the significance of what you're calling them to? What makes you think they're a good fit, right? What do you see in them? This is that affirmation language. I think you'd be good for this because of this. You have the right character, attitude, beliefs, you're networked, you have skills. Like, why are you even approaching them? And if you can't come up with that, don't approach them. I mean, honestly, if you can't figure out why this person you think they'd be good in the ministry, I'd have you pause and pray about that before I would approach them. How long will it really take, right? I've heard this, it's just, hey, come be a middle school small group leader. It's just 20 minutes on Thursday night. Except for the 2 hours you have to do to prep, right? Except for the half-hour drive time to get there. Oh yeah, and we want you to be there the whole program, not just the 20 minutes you're teaching with them. And afterwards, most of us kind of stick around and clean up. Right? This is that Jesus told the ups and downs. He told them the real thing. This might not be the reason. This is, I think, one of the reasons people quit, right? Is because you don't set the realistic expectations. They get in there and say, this is not what you talked to me about. So tell them, how long is it really going to take? How will they be trained? Again, most people don't want to do something they don't think they're going to be good at. So explain to them, here's how you're going to be trained. Here's what you're going to do. Here, I'm going to pair you up with a buddy. Like, what are some of those things that would help with that motivation? What happens if they don't like it? I think this is huge. I think one of the biggest barriers to calling people into ministry is they're terrified that if they try something and it isn't a good fit, they will be stuck forever. Who wants to quit? You've built this all up. You're going to be part of the biggest, greatest mission in the whole world. And you're going to be, I don't want to do that anymore. Right, that's a really, really difficult thing for people to do. I think those are some frank conversations that you need to be setting up as part of your, I'm going to check in after a couple weeks. We're going to see how it goes. You might tell them they're not a good fit, right? You need to have permission to be able to do that as well. But again, people are, I think, sometimes scared that they're just going to be stuck doing something. So they won't do it at all. What do they do next, and when will you follow up? This is that call to action thing, right? Don't sounds horrible. Don't rely on them to be the one who's going to come tell you, hey, I'm in, right? And that in this recruiting conversation, you want to say, hey, think about this. I'm going to follow up with you next week to see what your thoughts are. Or the next thing you need to do is, hey, let's come back next Sunday and you need to, let's have you pair up with someone and watch what's happening. Like, give them a significant next step to do. If you don't give them the next step, they're not going to do anything because they don't know what to do. That's your responsibility to help them make that connection to the next step and then follow up to make sure they do it. So hopefully, it's a simple process, right? You have to identify your opportunities. Where are my holes? Where are my growth opportunities? What can I give away? What should I give away? Based on that, you create a profile. Now that I know my opportunity, who would be good for that? It's not just a skill-based thing. It's a character, it's a knowledge, it's an attitude, it's all of those things. And then and only then, when you have those things, can you start to be the Ed Sullivan, right? Can you start to say, I got a stage that you'd be really good at. And you know what? When you get on that stage, I'll be there for a second, I'll introduce you, but my goal is I'm gonna walk to the wings. I'll be there, but my goal is to see you shine on that stage while I'm over here trying to figure out who else is gonna come up after you. Because our goal should be, as leaders, yeah, we're always gonna be doing things, but hopefully at some time you make the shift from doing to equipping. So as you walk out of here, remember, don't be a burl.